Hello Internet people, Paul Summers from paulsummersphotography.com, and in this episode I'm going to show you how to recreate non-destructively an old analog effect called the Orton effect. Stick around. Bit of a backstory. I shot a forest on the weekend, and I came back and I had all these ideas of what I wanted to do with them, and I couldn't get any of them to work. So I just started experimenting around, and I came up with this, and I wasn't entirely happy with it, but it kind of had a little bit of charm. So I sent it out on my social media bubble, and they're all very honest and good people, and they squat you down pretty quickly if they don't like something. But people liked it, and they said I shouldn't be unhappy with it. But even nicer was a lot of people from different places also said, I wish I could do that. How did you do that? So I thought this is a perfect opportunity to do a tutorial on an analog film effect called the Orton effect, which was named after a photographer, Michael Orton. And Michael Orton, this is one of his, it's probably one of his most famous ones, but he used to shoot transparencies. So slide film, if you like. And he would take a photo of a scene like this, and then he would take a second photo. But the second photo he would overexpose and put out of focus. Then when he got back to his darkroom, he would get the in focus and the overexposed out of focus transparency together and print them, and voila, magic. You can check out Michael Orton's website. I think he must still be alive and kicking and working. And that's just at michaelortonphotography.com. So, and what I've done here is a variation of that Orton effect. But to be able to do this, we need to understand how to do the Orton effect. And look, there's a lot of Orton effect panels and plugins and things like that around. The way I'm going to show you allows you to have full control over everything and do it non-destructively in Photoshop. Depending on what you're working, it may be easier just to go into Luminar, for example, has a Orton effects panel, and just move the slider and bang, you have it. If you process on a mobile device, Snapseed has the glow buttons effect, which is essentially different strengths of the Orton effect. The problem with particularly the mobile stuff is that it applies a glowy look to your photograph, but it applies it to the whole photograph. And while that may suit certain photographs, most photographs, you don't want the whole photograph glowy, because you put some time and effort into getting toning and shadows and things right, and the glow can then just even out all the tonal work that you've done. So we're going to have a look at how you can control that and have full control over your tones, over your saturation, everything. So bear with me while I close down these and hop into Lightroom, which is where my catalog is until Luminar adds the catalog function. And so we have another woodland scene, and I've already done a little bit of pre-processing on it. So what we want to do now is we want to open this in Photoshop, but we want to open this as a smart object. So we right click on the image, we go to edit in, and we go down to the bottom where it says open as smart object in Photoshop. The other problem with the doing all over Orton Glow is if you're going through a Facebook feed or an Instagram feed or a whatever feed, and you just keep seeing all these glowy photos, your photo is just, it's not going to get noticed. No one's going to look at it. It's just another glowy photo. So, okay. So now we're here and we've got a smart object, and that's great because at any time you can double click your smart object and we can go into Camera Raw and make any adjustments. Might just bring the blacks down a little bit, and voila. So the first thing we want to do is we want to duplicate this smart object. Now, the usual way you duplicate a layer in Photoshop is using the duplicate layer menu or hitting Control J. But if you do that on a smart object, those smart objects become linked. So now if I go back into my original layer and do something crazy like turn the temperature up to furnace, then you'll also notice that it has done it on this duplicate layer. And we don't want that. We do not want the layers linked. So we're going to delete that. We're going to open this and put my temperature back to a reasonable 7500, I think it was. 74, yeah, close enough. And we're going to duplicate the layer via copy. So we right click and we go up to the Smart Object section and we'll find a menu item that says New Smart Object via Copy. And now the two layers are not linked. But we don't want to get confused, so we're going to call this layer the background layer, because we don't really have a background layer because we opened as a smart object. So we're going to call it the black background layer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate that layer. And this time we do want the smart objects linked. So duplicate is Command J, and we're going to rename this and we're going to call it the Orton layer. Or you can call it the blur layer if that's easy to understand, whatever. So now we've got three layers. We've got the first layer, which really is more for safety keeping, the background layer, and the Orton layer. So what we want to do is we want to go into the background layer, our base layer, and we want to do what Orton did, and that is overexpose it. So I'm just going to overexpose it by one stop. So take that up to 150 and bingo, that's done. And you can also see that that has been reflected in our Orton layer. So now what we want to do is we want to go to our Orton layer and we want to go to our blend menu and we want to put this into multiply. Depending on the effect that you want and the type of photo you're working on, you may also like to put it into overlay mode, soft light, vivid mode, linear. We're just going to stick with multiply for now. Works with this scene, but I encourage you to experiment and see what effects that you can get with the various blend options. So now we're going to go up to our filter menu and down to blur, Gaussian blur, and we're gonna blur it. So now this is a 24 megapixel image. So for that, I tend to choose a range between about 30 and 50. So we'll make it a nice even 40. You can see that if we really push it up to 1,000, we don't really get a blurring at all. We just get a toning down, if you like, of the entire image. Likewise, it depends what you want to blur within the photo, where you want to add this effect. If we wanted to add the effect to the grass here and not necessarily to the tree trunks, then we'd probably go for a smaller radius of around 9 or 10. So that does affect the tree trunks, but not noticeably. So again, experimentation is your friend. And you know, let's be honest, you're just sitting in your mother's basement doing this, no one's watching, so you can make as many mistakes as you like and as many versions as you like. And in fact, the initial image that I showed you, there were 6 versions of that. And the photo that you saw was actually the first version. So that's the way it goes sometimes. So we're going to stick around 40 because that's good. And we're going to say, okay. And now we have our Orton effect. So the first thing we can do is that we can now go into our layers, any of our layers, and we can start playing around with our highlights and shadows. We can bring our shadows down a bit, and the highlights are a little bright, so we'll bring those down a bit, and we can see what that does, and that darkens it right up. So we might just undo that. We can also play with our opacity. Till we get it where we want it. And we can also add a layer mask, and this is probably the most important thing. Is again, you don't want everything to have the same tone in your photo. You want to break those tones up so there's some interest there. So you really want to hit the highlights, and so we've added a layer mask. We're going to invert it with Command I, And now we can paint white on that black layer mask anywhere we want it. We'll set the opacity to 50% because that's halfway, and we can take it up or down as we go, but we really want to hit the highlights. So and anywhere there's light, we want it to be a little glowy. So now if you're using a product like Luminar, which is an excellent product and it has its own little Orton effect built in that you can do it, that's fine. Just remember to mask and just not use it for the whole thing. Okay. So we've done some stuff there, and you can play with the background that we also overexposed, and we might find that there's a bit too much contrast there, so we can pull down the contrast, pull down the clarity. We can go into the effects menu, and we might like to add some haze to the whole scene, not that much haze. Now, of course, the shame of this is that when you go into the layers, you can't preview what you're getting. I don't like that, so that took away all our contrast. And then, of course, you can just go up and you can do what we did in the last episode, and that is start dodging and burning your trees to get a little more contrast in just the trees. So new layer, down to overlay mode, fill with overlay neutral color. Okay, we're going to black. We're going to, we'll leave that at 50 because we can always reduce the opacity, and we can start doing some dodging and burning, particularly in our tree trunks. We want them to stand out a little more, not the ones near the sun obviously, but the ones closer to the camera. Very sloppy of me, but just reminding you that this isn't to show you how to create a masterpiece. It is merely to show you the technique. Okay, and we can take that down a little bit, and that looks good. Okay, so that's how you create the Orton effect and make it look all soft and glowy. And again, if you want more glow, you can add more glow. You can glow it up. Okay. You can go into this and even pull up the exposure maybe a little bit more because you're in multiply mode. It tends to darken things. You've got to worry about the sun up there, but oh well, that's that. Now we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to show you a variation. And there are many variations that you can do with this. Once you start playing with it, there are a lot of variations that you can do. So copy smart object, or new smart object via copy, and that's going to give us our background. Great. And then we just want to duplicate that, so that's Command J. Okay, and we're going to call this blur. Okay, we're going to increase the exposure again of the background. One stop. Again, and the amount you increase the background is going to depend largely on your photograph and the subject. And then we're going to go into blur, but this time we're going to go filter, blur, motion blur. And when it's set at 90 degrees, you'll notice our trees are all blurry. Look at that. So with the original photo I showed you, I think I left it about 1,000 pixels. But it's a smart object, so we can re-edit that filter at any point in time. If we decide that we want to do something different with it, we can. We can increase it to 2,000 pixels. So it depends how much detail you actually want in your blur. So we're going to leave it there. Now we're going to add a layer mask. And we're going to paint with black where we do not want the blur. So around the trees, and it's kind of hard to see where it all stops. And of course you can vary this down so that you can gradually ease it off. Just a final run. Okay. But now we've kind of ruined some of the blur on our trees, so we're going to switch to white because we're going to clean up some of these trees. I'm going to put this up to 70%. And we're going to put a bit more blur back into these trees, give them a bit of mystery. Okay, and you know what, once again, you've got a smart object, so you can turn the saturation down on the greens. And green is always green and yellow. or you can turn it up. Don't oversaturate it. There's enough oversaturated stuff in my feed now, and you can just keep adding your adjustment layers and fillers, and so we've got the sun up here, and it's a little white, so we're going to just grab a layer and we're going to put it into overlay mode. Come over here, select a nice yellow color with a very big brush, and we're just going to color in some of that yellow, and maybe that's a little too much. Take it down. So that's the Orton effect. You've learned how to do it with a Gaussian blur, motion blur, but don't forget you've got a whole lot of other blurs here, and just feel free to experiment and try new things, and that's how you create art. My name is Paul Summers. Check out paulsummersphotography.com for my prints and other merchandise, iPhone cases, shower curtains, whatever the heck I sell. And I'll see you next time. Bye.